Barefoot Nation? This week we are talking all about Alocasia. So 5 tips to make sure that you grow your Alocasia like a pro. Let's go! Alright y'all, so when you're talking about growing Alocasia, the first thing that I want to talk to you about is fertilizer. So now, Alocasias, what I like to do is give them a fertilizer that is high in nitrogen. And so now, when you're looking at a fertilizer label, ironically this is for bananas, and the other thing I'll note as well is that this is a synthetic fertilizer. So this is going to basically force feed your plants to grow. Kind of causes some problems that you wouldn't really think, but anyway, when you're looking at a fertilizer label, the first number that you'll see is nitrogen, and the second number is phosphorus, and the third number is potassium. So nitrogen is going to fuel green growth, lots of leaves and healthy foliage. The second number, phosphorus, is going to fuel flowers and root development, and the third number, potassium, is going to fuel kind of like a general, it's kind of like just helps out the phosphorus. So with Alocasia, I like to use a high nitrogen fertilizer now. The other thing is generally I'll do slow release. Alocasias don't grow as fast as their cousin Colocasia. Colocasia is generally, that's a whole separate issue. And so if you do use quick release fertilizer on your Alocasias, just bear in mind that, they're gonna grow faster. They're gonna respond to it, but you could be inviting pest issues to those plants. What this chemical fertilizer is going to do is it's going to force feed the plant, and it's going to basically make it be bloated. So imagine, you're giving the plant a Thanksgiving dinner every time that you use that stuff. So you really have to be cautious with the chemical fertilizer. It does have its place. The reason I actually have this stuff is on a separate note, because a Musa Boschu banana has just been not growing at the rate that you would kind of expect out of a banana that's been in the ground for 2 years, but I'm distracted. So fertilizer, I prefer slow release and also organic fertilizer that's high in nitrogen. Any of the Espoma products are going to be really good for that. The next thing I want to talk to you all about regarding Alocasia is dormancy. So now, this here is an Alocasia Frydek, and I actually planted it first thing in spring. Perhaps it was a little too early. The soil temperature in this trough container just was not very warm, and so it actually triggered this plant to go into dormancy. So now, that can happen a lot of times with Alocasia. Even these little plants like the Frydeks, they do have a little corm or bulb that the plants can totally die back and basically disappear, and they sometimes will take their sweet time to come back out of dormancy, and that's just really there's not a whole lot you can do to pull them out of dormancy except give them as much heat, humidity, in tropical conditions that you can, and that is really aided by giving them a summer vacation. So basically having them outside during the summer is going to be super helpful. One thing that you're not going to want to do to try and pull an Alocasia out of dormancy is fertilize it. Because basically if this plant wants to go to sleep, whether it's a Frydek or any of the other types of Alocasia, if it wants to go to sleep, you're going to want to make sure that you don't kind of interfere with its so-called circadian rhythms. You basically, if this plant wants to go dormant, you don't want to try and force it out of dormancy. So as tough as it might be, you definitely want to let it go to sleep and let it wake up once it gets hot. And that could be with a heat mat, that could be with all sorts of different artificial heating sources if it's going dormant in the winter, or you want it to get an early start in spring. But kind of like an amaryllis, I would probably leave it to be dormant for 8 weeks if it decides to do that. Sorry to interrupt this Alocasia goodness. However, I have a quick favor to ask. YouTube says that over 97% of my viewers are not subscribed. So If you like this content, here, there, wherever it is. If you like this content and it provides value to you, or at least entertainment, be sure to hit that red subscribe button and the bell to get notified of all or personalized videos. Much appreciated, y'all. Back to the Alocasias. You can see here that this Regal Shields, even though it's in a huge pot, it's actually got a lot of other plants that are also in this container. And this plant has actually shrunk over time. So when they're in pots, all the experience that I've had with Alocasia is they really don't like being root bound. So if you have the opportunity to plant your elephant ears, whether it be Alocasia, Colocasia, or any of these plants in the ground, even if it's just for the summer, I definitely recommend doing that. Like this plant is gonna need a lot more water than the same Regal Shields that's in the ground. Now, the other thing one way that if you do need to keep it in a container, but you're still giving it a summer vacation, is this container actually has a drainage hole. And it's also made of terracotta or clay. It is painted and glazed, so that does help as far as water loss, but definitely it makes a difference. So, coming back to this one here, if we look down, you can see that this plant is actually it also has a lot of other plants planted with it. So you got some, so there are some flowering vinca, the annual or the tender perennial, whatever it is, I'm actually not sure. You got some alyssum, you have a tenanthe labursiana, which is just such a fun name to say. And of course the alocasia in this pot. This plant is planted in a container that's super tall, but it doesn't have drainage. So basically, the way I water this plant is I will have a hose now granted, heat is gonna play a huge role in this. If you're not having temperatures that are over 80 degrees semi-regularly, or otherwise known as 26 Celsius, I believe. If you don't have those warm temperatures, this watering is gonna be different. But even still, having them outside for their summer vacation is still hugely important because air movement and wind and rain is just so beneficial for these plants. Any plant, really. What the brightest room in your house is, it does not even pale in comparison to outdoor shade, let alone outdoor sun. Just imagine being stuck in a cave for 12 months out of the year and, you know, being fed, well, anyway. As far as the water is concerned, what I do is I'll take my hose and I will just fill that container until it's basically not like full of water, but you know, pretty dang close. I will absolutely drench this container and then I kind of let them dry down. You know, so I might drench the heck out of this container once every week or every couple days, but it's not getting water every day, and when it does, it gets a lot. The fact that there are so many other plants and other root systems growing on in that pot definitely will help. While they can't, if you live in like Queensland, Australia, or maybe in Southeast Asia, yeah, sure, you can have them be aquatic plants. But for the rest of us, alocasias need to be able to go dormant. And if you have them growing in too much water, those corms will rot. And that will, of course, lead to the death of your plant if they ever needed to have that dormant period. On the note of a summer vacation, what I mean by that basically is whether you're taking your plant out if you only have a balcony. In this case, you can see that this Alocasia boa here is planted in the ground for the summer. Given the fact that I'm in Zone 6, New York, I do not get the opportunity to leave this in the ground all year. Alocasias generally are hardy to Zone 7B or 8A. Of course, a warmer climate still is even better if you want them to stay green all year. One hard frost will take all this glorious foliage and just knock it right back. So you can either, so as far as a summer vacation goes, I like to get these planted out the second week of May, weather permitting, and then I'll leave them outside until sometime in October, or whenever the nighttime lows are, you know, about 50 degrees or warmer. and that's for ideal growth. Of course, they can tolerate colder temperatures, but if you really want to amp up their growth, having them outside in the sun, in the rain, and the wind is going to just help them out so much. And you might ask why wind is important. You can see how stout these stems are. If you have this inside, this stem right here, which even though this is every bit of 3 feet long, the petiole aspect of it, so from where the stem connects to the leaf down to the base, that's about 3 feet. If this were inside, it would probably be double, but definitely a third longer. And so that will, in wind, when you put it outside, a lot of the winter foliage will just be very weak compared to what it is now. And so again, you might be thinking, well, why would I put it outside if it's gonna potentially snap the leaves? Well, think of the growth rings on a tree. So this plant is able to just supercharge that corm that's in the ground or in its container. The sun and all these conditions are gonna supercharge that corm and kind of help it to get through the not so sunny times of year much easier, have much more energy stored than if it just stayed inside all year. I just love this variety. I haven't had boa in years. This is definitely a sun lover, and it's kind of a slower alocasia. And this is gonna dovetail beautifully into the section about giving your alocasias enough light. And by that I mean sunlight. So when they're inside, you want to put them in absolutely the brightest room that you can, and probably in the biggest pot that you can as well. Look at this salvia. There's like 4 honeybees on this one flower. ADD. So this alocasia here is an Alocasia odora, and this plant is an absolute monster in the right spot. Now you can have alocasias in anything from full sun all the way into high open shade. So if you have tall trees where the canopy is 10 plus feet off the ground, that's where the branches start, then that's good for alocasias. But what they really don't want to be growing where there's no direct sunlight. So even this plant here, you can see that it basically is getting shaded by this amazing salvia, this Cavendish banana, and also the bamboo. So this plant is getting definitely some direct sun, but you can see at ground level that this plant is definitely stretching for light. And I think that's mostly because of the salvia. The salvia is every bit of 5 feet tall, if not 6. And so this is kind of a good illustration of what I was talking about with the alocasias stretching out their stems kind of more than they should. The main difference here is that the plant is still outside, so it's still getting a breeze and it's still getting more sun than it would if it were indoors. But sunlight is absolutely pivotal to making sure that your alocasias are able to feed that corm that they need. Now these green varieties are definitely able to, as opposed to Regal Shields or the other ones that are more colorful, these green varieties are definitely able to take more shade than some of the ones such as Regal Shield or some of the other kind of more colorful varieties. I should also mention too that if you're planting your alocasias in the ground, making sure that there's enough organic matter and mulch is going to be really important for them. In time, they're going to produce, their corm is actually going to grow out of the ground and sort of form like a trunk. And when this gets tall enough, you can actually kind of, if you imagine it being about a foot tall or so, you can actually cut this off and start the top as a new plant, and then these buds that you can see a clear example here, but these buds are going to sprout, so you can actually propagate these pretty easily. Alright y'all, so that's going to do it for this video. Drop it down in the comments. What did you learn? Or are you already an Alocasia pro? Also too, I'm curious what your favorite variety is. I happen to like all of them, and I take a Pokemon approach, like I gotta grow them all. Can't believe I just said that. Here we are. So,
I do find that some Alocasias are more finicky than others. And now that I'm thinking about it too, I definitely need an Alocasia artwork, as well as, oh man. Alright y'all, if you like the content, be sure to drop it a big ol' thumbs up. See ya!